Kyren Williams, what does he do for an encore after his huge performance against Arizona? We're going to talk a little bit about the Colts and their running back situation. And is there a Saints wide receiver we can use this week, given all their injuries? Here with Lindsay Rhodes, we'll be doing that next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Lindsay Rhodes from SiriusXM. You hear here all the time on Fantasy Dirt with Michael Fabiano all the time, weekdays, Monday through Friday on SiriusXM Fantasy. Lindsay, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, I'm happy to do this. I'm excited to talk some fantasy football with you.
Yeah. And I want to talk, first of all, before we get into this week, about your journey to getting here, because you started off more on just the general football side of things rather than the fantasy side of things. How did you get to the point where you're now doing fantasy football for a living?
That's a good question. I hadn't played fantasy football prior to joining NFL Network. And then the reason that I started playing fantasy football was primarily to I think it's a really good way to make sure that you stay familiar with what's going on all across the league. Like if you play fantasy football and you try to do it well, you're going to know a lot about what's going on in the NFL because you are forced to figure out like where the wide receiver threes are that you might be able to put into your lineup. And so it's a good way to learn the league and the lay of the land in terms of rosters. And so that's kind of why I actually started playing. And then I'm very competitive, so I want to do well with everything. And then when I stopped working for NFL media, looking for different things to do, and Fabs, who's a good friend of mine, was great and was like, you should come on the show and we should do the show together. And I kind of looked at it as like, I was definitely coming at it more from a football analysis point of view, and then working some fantasy analysis into it, but sort of, and I think I still do that to a degree. I really like talking about roster building when it comes to the draft and looking at the broader themes of the NFL. But that also helps from a fantasy standpoint. So I think, a lot of fantasy analysts come to their analysis for different reasons. Like some people are very data driven, some people are very tape driven. And so I think that my background in the league as a reporter and a host, kind of trying to read between the lines of what is said out there and what the stories are. And I think that that's kind of helped frame like the direction at which I come to the fantasy analysis. And then I just think the data that's become available in the last few years in particular is just sort of blown up. There's so much information out there. Yeah. And I feel like even on a week-to-week basis, I'm finding new sites that have interesting stats or ways at looking at things. And I'm still trying to kind of nail down exactly what I think is most important and most predictive and sticky, as the analysts would say, or the analytics people would say, when it comes to trying to figure out what is going to happen based on what has happened. But that's sort of a circuitous answer to your question. But I've really enjoyed the lane that I've landed, and I have a lot of fun doing the fantasy show, talking about fantasy football for 2 hours every day with Fabs. It's been a blast.
That's awesome. And we all take our circuitous routes to get to where we are. I mean, I was studying for the bar exam when we launched our company, and
oh my gosh,
attorney, but never practiced. And I'm super happy with that result. Do you find yourself at an advantage, like an informational advantage or an ability to read between the lines when a news item breaks? And when okay, they're saying this, but this is what this really means.
Yeah, I do think that there is an advantage there of just years and years and years of being able to process information quickly and efficiently find the things that are most important. I think that that's one of the most important things for a reporter to do, is to be able to pull out not just the headlines in like an attention grabby sort of way, but like a what's important in this article. And then what are the questions that remain unanswered? And I always thought that was always something I was looking for as a host or a reporter. How can I advance the story? What information is already out there? And then what can I ask questions about that will move it forward or provide answers to some of the holes and the things that are unknown. And so I do think that skill set that has been built up over the years is advantageous in this particular ballpark. But I do think also that there's something to be said about like overthinking it to a degree that is not advantageous.
Right.
I do think that when I first started playing fantasy football, it felt a little bit broader and like, well, that guy's very good. And so I won't overthink that. And now that I am in the weeds with all of the numbers, I find that sometimes I can maybe overthink things a little bit. And I think that some people do that maybe this week with like the Saints situation. We had a call earlier on the show today that was, I forget who the other, it was Tyler Lockett or A.T. Perry. And I understand the question because you're looking for, with all of the injuries or health concerns there in New Orleans, you're looking for people to catch the ball. And so you're thinking, well, A.T. Perry might get volume and it's a bad matchup for Seattle. And the offense hasn't been particularly great this year. And he hasn't been consistent. None of them have been consistent from a fantasy standpoint. But there's like somebody who's kind of halfway paying attention is never going to overthink that and miss out on a much more skilled player in Tyler Lockett, who does have volume. Like we know he has volume, right? So we're projecting potential volume onto A.T. Perry and at the risk of moving away from a guy that you know is going to be on the field for all of these past plays.
Right.
And I think we tend to kind of overthink things when you do have all of this data to our detriment.
Absolutely agree with you on that one there. And I think especially it's at this point of the season in particular, this is like do or die to get into the playoffs. We got 6 teams on bye. You may be sitting there at 6-6, like, oh, I really got to win this week. Oh, let's not leave points on the bench. And it's the worst thing. I always ask myself, okay, if my star goes off on my bench, how unhappy am I going to be versus this other guy? And I that's usually how we resolve that.
The other side of that, though, is that if you're like, I don't know, I think that this guy that no one's really on is like, this is a sneaky good matchup. And then that guy goes off and you're like, I knew it and I didn't trust my gut. And so I think that they both, you can both sides are frustrating. It's all 100%. Frustrating. Welcome to fantasy.
Yes. Only team one team wins every year. The rest of us end in failure. It's just like sports. Yeah. So there you go. This is a tough week. Let's talk about some of the positions. We'll start off at quarterback.
I think that's the toughest position this week. I think that's what we lost the most. Well, I guess, running back's always tough.
Nasty this week.
That's true. Juwan Johnson.
Yeah. Yes. Let's start off with CJ Stroud. He's been a find for us. He's been a star for us. We can't wait to start him every week, but he might not have Tank Dell. He showed up on the injury list today and missed practice. He's got a tough matchup. Quietly, the Broncos are a tough matchup now. They gave up 70 earlier, and yet they're a hot defense right now. What are you doing with Stroud in this matchup?
How has this the problem with Stroud for me that I'm finding, and if you have Stroud and then not as good a quarterback, like just roll with Stroud. But I think a lot of people who have Stroud and someone. And so it becomes a tougher either or where you are trying to like figure out which matchups or when to put him in. That's the problem that I have with him anyway. Because I have him on a team. I think I have him on a team where I have Lamar and Kyler. So you're like, when,
Right.
And you mentioned Tank Dell. The one that I'm actually a little bit more worried about, which sounds egregious. I kind of think that Tank Dell is going to play. I think that, in terms of reading between the lines of the reporting, it sounds like they're not that concerned about him and that, he's a little bit banged up. So it makes sense that they're letting him rest to get ready for the game. And so my read of that situation is that I think he's going to be on the field, albeit not 100%, but who's 100% these days. Right. The one that I'm concerned about is them having lost Titus Howard on the line, because the line has been so good this year in terms of pass protection and giving him time. And that's a huge component to any quarterback, regardless of how quickly they're processing or whatever they're doing. And he's been outstanding, but you want to have time to be able to read the field and get the ball to the right place. And they went into last week as PFF's 10th ranked offensive line this year. And then he gets hurt. They struggle in pass protection. They gave up 21 pressures, 3 sacks on 46 dropbacks, and had the 3rd lowest pass block win rate of the week. And so I think that that's something that's kind of on my radar in terms of this game against the Broncos, which is a defense that's obviously gotten much better as the year has gone on. And so I want to make sure that he is going to have time in a matchup that I think is already going to be a pretty tough matchup. That's low key one of the games that I'm the most excited about this week, because it's hugely important in terms of playoff probability. Tej Seth from Sumer Sports, I have become a little bit obsessed with the graph that he puts together every week, which has playoff probability leverage. And the way he shows it is like, it's pretty cool. You can see like the lines so visually you can see how important the game is and how much leverage it is. And this is clearly the biggest leverage game of the week. The Texans, if they win, have a 50% chance of making the playoffs. If they lose, it drops to 25%. Broncos 43% if they win. If they lose, it drops to 16%. So effectively, these two teams that are fighting for that last wild card spot, it looks like it could effectively, from a probability standpoint, knock the loser out of the playoff mix. So I'm really interested because I'm not 100% sure I know which way it's going to go. Like on the surface, you think, and we're coming at this from a fantasy standpoint. So I think we're all in love with the Texans and what they bring to the table. But the Broncos aren't as exciting from a fantasy standpoint, right? Like, so I think we kind of look at them and we're like, but are they really good? Because they keep not getting there for us in fantasy, and the Texans look like they're just blowing the world up. But clearly the Broncos, what they've done during this stretch of games, they've done it against good teams for the most part. Right. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. But to your question, I would still play CJ Stroud the same that I would play him every other week. So but again, as I mentioned, that's always an either or that I've been dealing with on my specific rosters is like, Kyler or CJ, Lamar or CJ. Now Lamar's out of the mix this week, so that makes it easier in some cases. But but if you would play him normally, I would continue to play him this week. I wouldn't put him on the bench.
Yeah, I think that's the route I'm going to as well. It's just be prepared that you're going to get maybe 20 points instead of 25, or 18 instead of 22 or something like that. Jordan Love, are you buying into the new and improved Jordan Love?
I think so. Because I think it also makes sense that he's getting better as the season goes on, right? Yeah, like early in the season, there was a higher rate of turnover worthy throws. And that sort of was an indicator of maybe some of the things that we were seeing in terms of the fantasy production early on that we all became enamored with, that maybe that wasn't something that he could sustain the whole season, that turnovers were inevitable to come along. And they did, and the play regressed and their success regressed. But I think also he is, and I say this about all of these young quarterbacks, even like the guys that, we weren't planning on playing, like a Tommy DeVito. I think that there's the potential for huge growth from a week to week standpoint. I think every week becomes its own ecosystem with a young quarterback, because you're trying to figure out, like with Sam Howell early in the season with all of the turnovers and all of the sacks, or specifically the sacks. You're like, okay, but how quickly will he figure this out? That's the question with these young quarterbacks, is they all take a minute when they start playing to figure out, like, oh, this is what open means in the NFL. Oh, this is how long I actually have to get rid of the ball in the NFL. I forget who it was, but there was a quarterback a couple of weeks back that literally pump faked. And I was like, oh my God, like you never see that in the NFL because everyone knows that they don't have time to do that. Right.
So you see the one throw by Kyle Trask, he kind of did the pat the ball thing. And it's like, and then of course it was a little late, and it was, Godwin was just like a step out because of that.
Yep. So I think it makes sense that Jordan Love is getting better as the season goes on. Yeah. And it also makes sense in particular with him because he's surrounded by a lot of young talent. You're talking about Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. All of them are also in their own silos of figuring things out and fixing mistakes on the fly. And so I'm optimistic about what they're building there in Green Bay. And I think they've got a lot of really talented young players that they can build around for the future. He seems like he's processing more quickly. looked really good on play action versus Detroit. So I think he's definitely a guy that's a little bit more schedule based for me from a fantasy standpoint. Like if you are desperate with 6 teams on a bye and looking for a quarterback, then maybe he becomes a little bit more attractive, particularly because we've seen a higher ceiling than we have for some of these other options that you would be looking to stream at the quarterback position.
For sure. And this week it's tough. It's against the Chiefs. And we never used to say this, but the Chiefs are a tough matchup now. And that's tough when it's the Sunday night game, all that comes with that. So we'll see. But that does lead into my next question is, say you have Josh Allen or you have Lamar, who are you looking to stream this week to replace them?
Okay. Let's see, quarterbacks that we can stream to replace Josh Allen. And all right, thinking about waivers and who's available.
Yeah.
What'd you say? It's
not pretty this week.
It's funny because I thought you said Purdy, and I was like, it is Purdy. Yes. If Purdy's available on your waiver wire, it's 100% Purdy, but you didn't say that. You said Purdy. Waiver wire. I'm trying to figure out where my list is so that I can, but this is actually taking longer than if I just came up with the names without looking at a list, Lindsay. Good grief. Okay, let's look at that. Gardner is a guy that off the top of my head has a matchup that is better than usual. That was the case last week too, though, and it didn't necessarily get there as wide receivers got there. But going up against Tennessee, they're allowing a 72.8% catch rate for wide receivers, which is the worst in the NFL. So we all know that you can throw the ball against Tennessee. From a streaming standpoint, who else?
I'll throw out a couple of names and see. Okay. You can go. Yeah,
I'll tell you if I like them or no. Yep.
Kenny Pickett against Arizona.
No,
didn't think so. Russell Wilson now a game manager against Houston in this game.
Yeah. Russell's kind of sneakily, and I'll admit, I think I, like a lot of people, like I've been slow to give him many flowers this year because sure. I don't know. Last year was so gross. But he's been much better. He's been much better this year. The offense still has moments where you're like, what is happening though? Right? Yeah. Like, what do you think based on what you've seen? Are you sold enough that you keep him around? Like they're turning things around and he's looking better. Certainly. Is it better enough, you think, that they stick with him moving forward? Or at least if let's take the financial stuff off the table, right? Is that something that you think that they would choose to do?
I think maybe. I mean, I think it's going to be hard for them where they're sitting to find a better situation.
Now that they're winning.
Now that they're winning, they're not going to get that early draft pick. They're not going to be able to probably afford the financial stuff. Just makes it hard for them to afford like Kirk Cousins coming off an injury. Not that I think they'd even want to do that necessarily, but it kind of prevents that. I just don't think they're going to find a ready replacement. I think they're stuck in that middle, where they're kind of pot committed. I feel like, but we'll see. I mean, if he really have to be really bad to not use him.
Going through the games here to look for the answer to your question, I'm not sure that I'm seeing an obvious streamer. I mean, Sam Howell isn't a streamer at this point. You're not going to pick him up. If you can do that. I mean, I can't imagine that, he's available in many leagues out there with the rate at which they're passing the ball. Because for all of his deficiencies, like they just throw the ball so frequently that he's more often than not going to get there from a fantasy standpoint. What about Browning? If you're desperate.
Okay.
Like a super flex. This is super flex now. You're not going to start him in a 12 team.
So this is me being a Card King Bengals fan and a self-hating Bengals fan right now because I might be too close to it. And I'd say no, there's nothing downfield. It's all like, it takes too long for him to process. You were talking about that earlier with Love. The way he held onto the ball, had no pocket awareness against the Steelers. Jacksonville's got a similar pass rush. Quietly, they've had Allen's really heated up. Josh Allen's really heated up for them. I think that this is a team that is on Monday night. They're going to be hyped for this. This is their big showcase game. I think it could be pretty ugly. I hope I'm wrong, but I think it could be.
All right.
Maybe Higgins comes back and that changes things. I don't know, but I'm just very squeamish about it there.
In terms of like legit streamers that you might be able to get up off of the waiver wire, I would say that Gardner's probably the one that jumps out at me the most.
I agree.
In terms of having a plus matchup.
Yeah. I bye week option for sure. I mean, plus matchup and volume too, especially with no Taylor. He's going to probably throw it a ton. Plus, he might get you that odd rushing touchdown.
Is he? Is he? I'm not sure that this is the craziest thing that, week 1, if you had told me this was going to come out of my mouth in week 13, I would have been like, you're nuts. I don't know that we're getting that much of a downgrade at running back with Zack Moss stepping back into that backfield.
I think it's also, though, because when they had the two of them, they could just afford to run the ball a little bit more. When they only have one, and I don't know if they trust Trey Sermon, I think they may have to throw the ball a little more. Plus, please
don't trust Trey Sermon. None of us want that. Nobody wants that. Just volume, all Zack Moss to the moon. Yeah, let's do it.
I agree. Let's do it. I have him in my top 10 this week. And that does lead into that. Well, that we are talking about running backs and Zack, with Taylor out at least 3 weeks, probably more. I don't know. I'm surprised I guess they want to kind of keep all their options open, but anytime someone gets surgery like that, I think it's going to be longer than that. Moss, though, has been great when healthy, and so good, surprisingly so. It's like, what is Buffalo doing that he couldn't do that there?
Right. Buffalo's a totally separate story, man. There's so much. That's a fascinating squad on the high end. I mean, or at least one that should be on the high end. Buffalo and the Patriots, to me, are like, I just can't get enough of those two conversations this week, because I just think it's just fascinating that we're seeing what we're seeing out of those two AFC East squads. But with regards to Zack Moss, he's effectively not been on the field for a few weeks now, Jonathan Taylor, since he kind of took over there, and he still leads the NFL in total rushing yards over expectation on the season. Like Zack Moss, I don't know what clicked for him this season or what is happening there in Indianapolis that has led to this success, but he's second in the league at running back and rushing yards over expectation per attempt. There's something that he's bringing to the table that's really impressive. And I was shocked. I don't know if shocked is the right word. I was bummed from a fantasy standpoint, but then also real world, a little bit surprised that they didn't try to trade him at the deadline, because those of us in the fantasy space know how shallow the running back position is. And after he did what he did, when they knew that they were going to turn to Jonathan Taylor, clearly, why they wouldn't try to get something in return for Zack Moss. I mean, talk about the ultimate sell high at that point. And as it turns out, I guess good thing they didn't, because now they can turn to him. But I was completely surprised that they didn't trade him away to somebody else that was a little bit more desperate at the running back position. And this is the ultimate, again, fantasy, like bites you in the butt type situation. I guarantee you there are fantasy managers who finally, just this past week were like, okay, fine, I'll drop him to pick up whoever, whatever guy I need this 1 week off the waiver wire. And then immediately he becomes like a league winner, potentially.
You see it all the time too. It happens all the time like that. And you got to do it. 6 teams on bye this week. There was some big bye weeks earlier. You kind of forced to do that. And it's terrible when it happens.
Who is the guy for you that you're having a hard time? Like, you should, or is there anyone, you should drop him? That more often than not, more likely than not, he's just going to just eat up that space on your bench, but you just can't do it. Is there anyone for you?
Jerry Jeudy and Kyle Pitts.
Kyle I get. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they say the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I keep starting Jerry Jeudy and expecting something different. It just
starting him even.
Sometimes, yes. I mean, it's like 3 receivers and a flex. I'm in one league where we start 3 flexes. It's just like, it's borderline. It's just, I know better, but I can't stop it. I just know there's talent there waiting to come out.
Well, it's funny because mine is a Broncos wide receiver, but it's not Jerry Jeudy.
Marvin Mims, huh?
Yes, I can't do it because I keep thinking they're going to be out of it. At least, now they're competitive. Mm-hmm. So at least I kind of get it now. But for a good majority of the season, I was like, well, they're going to be out of it at a certain point, and then they're going to pivot to getting all these young guys. Jaleel McLaughlin is another one. Marvin Mims, these guys that have popped in terms of like their efficiency when they are on the field, which is infrequent, but when they are and when they give them the ball, the things that they're doing with it, it's like, oh my gosh, there's talent here. Sean Payton, what you could do with these two. And then every week it feels like he's standing at the podium going, God, we really do need to find ways to get Marvin Mims the ball. And I'm like, just do it, please.
Yeah, exactly.
He's so good.
Yeah,
and so I have not
Broncos,
been
it's
able
like
to
The
cut him.
Wire. Have you seen The Wire? Are you a Wire fan by any chance?
No, I have not seen The Wire.
Okay, there's a line in there where one of the villains says, you want it to be one way, but it's the other. That's the way it is with the Broncos. It's the other. We want it to be McLaurin, but it's P. Ryan. It's, McLaurin got 2
Oh my
snaps.
God. What? Yeah. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
P. Ryan, I was like, well, obviously P. Ryan's the odd man out there at a certain point a few weeks ago, right? Like Javonte Williams looks great. That's great. Okay, so Jaleel isn't going to turn into what I thought he might possibly be when Javonte was banged up. But okay, I can wrap my brain around that. And now you've got Javonte and Jaleel in that backfield. Okay. And no, that's not the way they decided to go.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I think Adam in the chat was saying earlier, the discordance between what we want in fantasy and what teams want in real life. And they don't listen to us. It's strange. I don't know why, but they don't.
I also think, Jeff, that there's probably something to the notion that like coaches are with these people and have an emotional investment in the people. Like we are just looking at the numbers. We're like, yeah, but look at what he does and his, per attempt this and that. And like, we're doing all the deep dive data analytics and they know the people. So I've thought this about like Alexander Madison with Ty Chandler in Minnesota. I'm like, oh, well, obviously Ty Chandler is taking over that backfield because Alexander Madison's super inefficient. And then that keeps not happening and they keep going to Alexander Madison. And I think there's a human component too with the coaches so that they are, just not to say that we're right from the outside, but we think that it's going and it's trending in a certain direction. And they are going to, even if we are right, I think that they're going to probably drag their heels a little bit more than we are because they're invested in the thing that they thought was going to be true for their team that year. They're going to give that a little bit more time and space because that's their prior. We don't have priors attached to this.
Yeah, absolutely right. You see this all the time. Well, you don't see them in practice. You don't know what they're looking like. So we see this the quarterback position all the time. Like, why aren't they giving this guy a shot? Why is Tim Boyle playing? Well, we don't see all of that's in practice. And maybe that's blinding the coaches too sometimes. But more time in the offensive coordinator system. Okay, great. Nathaniel Hackett's system. Yay. But, it's still, it's Trevor Siemian's the alternative. I guess it's fine to it. Go Cats. I'm a Northwestern guy, but still. I know better that Trevor Siemian's not really going to be that much of an improvement anyhow. So that's my little tangent aside there. We're going to talk some Kyren Williams here in a second, but first, quick note from our friends at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties, only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. And I'm here with Lindsay Rhodes, and you're smiling because you went to Circa. You know how awesome that place is.
That's where I last saw you, in fact.
Yes,
was at
indeed.
Circa. Yeah, that pool is that's the place to be on a Sunday during football season. I've never been there on a Sunday during football season because we were there drafting for our fantasy squads prior to the season kicking off. But I was like, this would be the place to be. That screen is nuts.
And RotoWire does a summer conference there. We did some drafts there as well. It is truly awesome. And they're not lying about the booming sound there too at poolside. It is really loud there. But anyways, Kyren Williams.
Oh my
goodness.
Right.
I thought he'd do well against Arizona. I had no idea he'd do that. I had no idea they'd be that untethered. They just say, go, we're not going to limit you at all. Just go.
First came back.
Yeah.
What has his best game of the year from a fantasy standpoint?
Yeah.
I think there was also a part of me though that was a little bit more thoughtful about Kyren in that first game back because of what happened to Devon Achane in his first game back the week before. And I know that my husband had played Devon Achane in his Deathly Guillotine League and
no.
was just traumatized by the fact that he got cut, and was saying, I knew I should have held him out for a week. And I was like, no, that was not the right answer. Like the process that you went by playing Devon Achane, who has been way better than any other running back in the NFL this year when he's been on the field. That was the right move. Like the talent is there, the opportunity is there, the offense is there, like all of it's there. And you assume if they say he is healthy enough to play, he's going to be on the field, and they're not talking about, limits to his snap count or anything like that. The right move is to play him because his upside is like 30 plus points, like we saw from Kyren. And then he gets hurt right away. And so then you have that in your head that like if somebody's coming back from injury, maybe you ease them in, maybe you wait and see. Like we got burned last week by a high-end running back. And so maybe we push pause on Kyren. And I mean, the opposite was true. So at least I was able to go to my husband and say, see the process. This is the process. This is what you could have had with Devon. You just had bad luck and that he got hurt right away. But his role is phenomenal. Like it's, I think since the beginning of the year, when he first blew up, I thought it was predominantly because of his role. Like he's one of a few people in the NFL that they've given bell cow volume to this year. I mean, 16 carries and 6 targets in his first game back. Like that's 100% what you're looking for. And there aren't that many running backs that have that type of bell cow type work. I mean, we're seeing so many shared backfields, way more than any of us would like to see in fantasy. But I tell you what, in the beginning of the year, his efficiency numbers, like rushing yards over expectation, when he put up 28 points against the Niners in week 2, he was dead last, according to Next Gen Stats, in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. And this past week, that exact stat was the best in the NFL.
Yeah.
He had 4.4 rushing yards over expectation per attempt. So per attempt, he's averaging more than 4 yards than the data available says that he probably should have on that. So I don't know if he's gotten better because, like I said, earlier in the year, I was thinking, I don't know if he's actually that good or if he's being propped up by the volume. Now it looks like it's both are true. So Kyren rest of season, I mean, I'm all about it. Matchup's tough though. Matchup's tough.
Cleveland. Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe so were the Niners.
Yeah.
Right. In week 2, we probably were like, I don't know. It's San Francisco. He was good in week 1, but like, let's wait and see. And then he scored 28 points against them with 10 targets. Like the way that they use him is just so interesting because he's getting all of the usage, right? It's not just like on the ground or so. I would say that he is the type of running back that you have to play through the tough matchups.
I think you're right.
Cross your fingers.
The thing is so frustrating about fantasy football is, all this good analysis that we have, it's good for the long run, but fantasy football is a short sample game. Your husband's guillotine league, any guillotine league, especially doesn't care about your process. It doesn't care. It's so brutish and nasty that, it's like, oh, we got to get it right. But the process was right. It's just long run. I'll win on that. But unfortunately, they don't give us a long run unless you play in a bunch of leagues.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if you do play in a bunch of leagues, your process can be correct. And you could just get hit with bad luck at different times in all of the different leagues. Like it's a fascinating game because I think, my teams I have some that are doing well and then some that are like middle of the road and some that are bottom of the barrel. Well, I don't know that I have any. Yeah, I do have some that are near the bottom, but and it's so interesting to think that you could pay this close attention as you and I both do and talk about this and know all of the information that's available and then make decisions based on that and then have it be so fluky. But at the end of the day, you're still betting on human beings to behave in a way that is predictable and they don't. You're still going to have a guy who wakes up that day and is just having an off day, or you're taking in all of this information and saying, oh, this team runs a lot of too high shell coverage. And so therefore it's easier for to get the tight end the ball because there are holes underneath. And there are coaches that just don't attack it that way. You're like, but it's there. And they're like, yeah, but I want to go over here instead. And so
exactly.
It's tough to predict. The best you could do for me, I think the good thing that I take away from this is regardless of the wins and losses, what I enjoy is the process. I enjoy the trying to figure out and do the problem solving. And then once they're in there, I'm kind of invested. But honestly, now that I have more and more teams, I'm less invested in the outcome of those because there's so much outcome anyway. Like if I had 2 squads, I would sweat those 2 squads all day long. But as it is, I have everyone and I'm playing against all of those same players in whatever league you want to mention. So my investment is just the things that I thought were going to happen this week. Are they happening? And that's how I watch the games, as opposed to like, am I winning that matchup? Like I'll kind of hardly check it. You know, I am personally less invested in the outcome. And you want to go back and check your work, certainly, but that's then part of the data collection for the next week. Yeah. And that's the part that I enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I root for my predictions to be right. I root for my rankings, my advice to be good. I root for my Bengals still. And then individual matchups, once it comes playoff time, then I'll sweat them a little bit closer. But fantasy playoff wise, I'll sweat them more individually. But often I won't even check to see if I won or lost until Monday night, you know, and
same.
Yeah. And partially I'm in like 18 leagues, so it's easy to do that. But yeah, so that's the way I've gone and I've evolved on that. So it's kind of interesting hearing it from you as well. Any running back starters this week for you that you wouldn't normally start?
Gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, that's a tough position to do this with.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you the grossness that I'm starting at running back this week in various leagues. Like in our SiriusXM host league, I am starting. My options were, I was starting up until this week. I'm going to put him on my bench. Jaleel McLaughlin. Not because I think that Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be good. I know that I'm looking at a max of 5 points, but I don't have any other options. And it's a 14-team league. And good luck with the waiver wire because there's also, 2 flex spots that everybody's looking to fill. And so, and it's a very deep bench. And so there are just some leagues where you're like, I don't even know. Like we talk about running backs, this or that. And I'm like, I'm going to play for the most part, the 2 okay options that I have. But also I went with a pretty across the board 0 RB strategy this year. And it has not worked out for me. My wide receivers are good, very good. But my running backs are so bad because the 0 RB running backs that we zeroed in on in that range this year, I think just almost in bulk haven't gotten there. Like there's a couple that went in those, middle rounds range that did hit, but a lot of them didn't. I mean, Miles Sanders, bad. Dameon Pierce, bad. Like, I mean, we were counting on the thought process in that range there was these guys are not particularly good, but they're going to get volume. For the most part, that's what it was. Or like in the case of Khalil Herbert, I think he is good, but he's not going to get volume. So because there's too many people in that backfield. And this year, what has happened that should happen, and we probably should have predicted was going to happen, is that if they're not good, they're not going to continue to get volume. Like it makes sense that you would move away from the volume if somebody is not particularly good. So maybe we should have seen it. I was just wrong about Miles Sanders. I thought that he would be much better in Carolina than he was in Philadelphia, where I thought part of the reason that he wasn't as good as some people expected him to be was because there were so many mouths to feed. He just didn't get the volume that was necessary. And I thought he would definitely see that in Carolina. And he did for a little while and proceeded to do absolutely nothing with it. And so someone else will get that opportunity.
And that's one of my lessons this year. And it's a lesson I need to relearn is it may look like there's not another guy. There's always another guy. If a guy can't play,
especially running back.
Yeah.
Where you see people coming off the couch.
Remember Scott Fishbowl? I was on with you and Jeff Ratcliffe for hosting. I made a pick while I was talking with you guys. Friends don't let friends draft Cam Akers while doing a live interview. Just don't do it. Don't do it.
I was probably nice to you about it. I don't have Cam Akers anywhere. That's the one where I'm like, pat myself on the back because I did see that one coming.
Good.
But that largely has to do with the back and forth of the relationship that he had with Sean McVay. Like all of a sudden that is like, he didn't like him enough before, but now he's in love with him to the point where he won't have a quick hook I never thought that was going to happen. But to that point, so I felt that way about your Cam Akers pick, and Fabs laughed at me every time I took Miles Sanders. Was like, he's bad, Lindsay, he's bad. I'm like, okay, dude, okay, you're a hater. And as it turns out, he was right. So it's, I think that's going to be an interesting conversation to start thinking about in the next few weeks. And maybe this is too early because people are still in the midst of starting their, doing their starts and sits and stuff. But just I'm starting to think about like, what did I do in drafts that I need to reevaluate for next year?
Mhm.
Because the 0 RB did not work for me this season. And we'll need to sit back and reevaluate why it didn't work, which ones hit, which ones didn't, and what the through line is there so that we can fix that moving forward.
Yeah. And sometimes like I did do 0 or hero running back where I did 1.
I do that.
I think part of my problem is when I did that is I didn't have enough volume. I think if you're going to go that route, you just have to keep drafting running backs after that. Get those stable 4 receivers that you're starting every week, maybe get one other, but then just running back, keep going. Just, I think you almost have to go that way. Because if you do like hero running back and that guy gets hurt, let's just call him Nick Chubb, for instance, you're still left holding the bag.
Yeah. That's 100% true. And there are guys this year that have come out of nowhere. So you could have done this as a strategy and then we could have picked up Kyren Williams and Zack Moss off of waivers at the beginning of the year. And then obviously we lost Kyren because of injury. And then Zach, we lost because of Jonathan Taylor. So maybe that wouldn't have even been a smart strategy. But I'm just saying there are people that you could have picked up throughout the year that could have carried you through. That would have made it okay, or you could have drafted them in a later round but you just have to draft the right ones. And I think that that's what I'm going to have to reevaluate. And I think if anything, I'm going to have to go with one at the top. Like I went wide receiver in a lot of drafts.
Me too.
Because I thought like these are going to hit, and now I'm set. Now I can focus on adding depth at running back. But I'm in a few leagues, and this is another lesson that I need to learn. I'm in one league in particular that I keep telling myself, don't do this again next year, Lindsay, where I drafted, my wide receivers are insane. Like I have Keenan and AJ, and I forget who the other one is. Anyway, I have had Puka Nacua on my bench the whole season. And I know that lately that has been the right move, but the whole season, like all of those games where he blew up, I had him on my bench. I didn't have a spot for him. And I tried desperately to trade him away to upgrade my running backs. And I'm in a league where people are just kind of like halfway in, they're playing casually and they're not, I didn't even get a response to any of my trade requests. So I'm like in here trying to, make moves and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I can't move them. And so I just stopped trying. I was like, they're not paying attention. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you're playing in a league like that, where people aren't going to play with you in that way, then you need to go in with that type of strategy in mind. Because in a shark league, you can say, I'm going to get all of this. Maybe I don't like the running backs. Okay. So I'm going to not guess on the running back and take the chance I'm going to guess wrong. I'm going to take a really good wide receiver that I know is going to be a wide receiver. And I'm going to have depth at one position. And then I have a trade asset. So I can trade away and try and, bulk up my running backs that way later on, once I actually can identify which ones are good and which ones are not good. And you just have to know what league you're in, I suppose. Right?
I agree. I also think it's my experience when you've got that breakout, you're not going to be able to trade the breakout Puka Nacua type. You're going to have to trade the brand name. You have to trade the AJ
the
Brown.
Cooper Cup. Yeah.
And then maybe you'll get that guy. And you probably won't get the guy you're thinking either. You'll probably get you'll lose a round's worth of value, but still might make it better fit your team. But that's what it's been I remember Cam Newton as a rookie. He was always our backup. You have Drew Brees and I have Cam Newton. You're not trading Cam Newton. You're going to trade Drew Brees and you'll be able to get something done. No one wants to trade for the unfinished, uncertain guy. It's just the way it's worked out for me. Before we hit wide receivers real quick, a quick other note from our friends at Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for their customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles, such as DFS, Pick-X, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sports books, Splash Sports pits you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tiers contests on Splash Sports all season. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. We are also on the Blue Wire Network. We like being on the Blue Wire Network, so we're going to play their ads right now. All right. Thank you there for that. The Blue Wire. Go to their studios in the Win if you get a chance. Awesome studios there. Let's talk a little wide receivers before we let you go. Want to talk? We alluded to the Saints and A.T. Perry. Can I interest you in A.T. Perry as a desperation pickup this week?
I don't think so. And I think the only place where I would think about playing an A.T. Perry is a place. I mean, you said desperation, so I suppose that box could be checked. I would have to be very, very desperate because like in the second half last week when Olave was already hurt now, like I think he was targeted one time after Olave left. And so he had that one big game. And so at least they've established that they could go to him. But I think it's notable that they didn't last week when they also were looking to go elsewhere and have people step up. And he wasn't really, and he also didn't play well when they did go to him. So I think the pivot there is Juwan Johnson that I feel more confident in. And honestly, like I would in a perfect world try to stay away. Juwan Johnson is the pivot for me because you might need a tight end. Like it's a shallow position. You're losing Hawk this week. Like there are certain people that are off the table. Isaiah Likely, if you moved to him after Mark Andrews' injury, Kincaid. Yeah, we're running low at tight end this week. So that's the way that I would pivot in terms of getting a guy that you can get off the waiver wire that's on that Saints offense is him, who led the Saints in routes last week, had a season high 19% target share, and was certainly widely available. But for the most part, the player I think will benefit the most is Kamara from all of these wide receiver injuries there, and Taysom, right? Yep. Like they still have Taysom that they can get in the mix, but I expect to see a bump in targets for Kamara this week. I'd be surprised if that didn't happen there.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. And I even think Taysom and Juwan are good calls too. We saw Tucker Kraft score last week against the Lions. Didn't have a ton of targets, but did score. And, right. It's kind of sometimes with tight ends, it's finding that touchdown lottery. So
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I could see that happening there. Okay. Well, I'm going to pick at this a different way here. Well, our old friend, Jerry Jeudy or Curtis Samuel this week.
Curtis, 100%. Because the team they played last week, they played Dallas. Dallas allows a lot of targets to the slot, and they peppered him with targets. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it was specifically matchup related. The Dolphins also allow a lot of targets to the slot. So I think that Curtis Samuel's not a guy that I'm like rest of season, Curtis Samuel, but in a high passing volume offense that has proven that they might be paying attention to that sort of thing. Like where are the holes? Where do most teams try to attack them with success? The fact that we have seen them try to take advantage in that way, and then now have another situation in front of them where I think they can do the same thing. I like Curtis Samuel this particular week.
All right. I like him too a lot. I like that. I think they're going to be having to throw the ball a ton against Miami. So we'll see. I think that works out pretty well.
That could be a fun game.
It could be.
I mean, the Commanders defense is going to give it all up to the Dolphins.
Yeah.
and I think that the Commanders offense has the ability to keep pace. So I think that could be a really fun watch.
I sure hope so. I mean, this season we've seen so many
true.
I mean, the Big Ten West has come to the NFL, and I'm a Northwestern guy, so I hate seeing the Big Ten West this year. It's so bad, and now the NFL, all these totals in the 30s.
I know.
I'm hoping this game and the Houston game is the tonic for us here.
Yep. And then obviously the Niners and the Eagles. Yeah. Woo! Yeah. Please get over 50. Do it. We
can do this. Dare to dream. Do we dream on Terry McLaurin ever coming back to the guy that we thought he was? By the way, I'm just
Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's had a rough go of it this year. When he's not playing Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Because why? I don't know. But he's got Philadelphia he likes playing in the 2 games against them. He's averaged 20 points per game. And then against everyone else, it's 10.8. So what?
And it's been single digits like the last 3 weeks. And they're they're throwing the whole entire second half. I mean, it's just there's so many games like that. The Chicago game, the Thursday night game where Byron Pringle is getting all these targets. I'm like, I can just see your buddy Fabs just going off on this. Just I can hear it in my head.
What?
Yeah.
Fabs go off?
Yeah, no, impossible. I know. But McLaurin's a good player still.
Yep.
I just don't get it. And Howell's not a guy that hurts wide receivers. It's so baffling to me.
No, it is one of the biggest mysteries of the season that Terry McLaurin hasn't dominated and just been peppered with targets. I don't know. And honestly, Jahan Dotson hasn't either. It's not like you would have thought going into the season, okay, Sam Howell, if I told you Sam Howell is going to throw the ball this frequently, we're going to have over 300 yards a game, pretty much on the reg. And you would think like both of them breaking out. Massive seasons for both, and that hasn't happened for either of them. It's just kind of sporadic, like someone has a big game here, someone has a big game there. It's too spaced out, it's too spread out. It's not particularly great for fantasy unless you have Sam Howell and want to play him perhaps, but even then I'm like he's more helpful in a super flex quarterback, right? Where like you already have a quarterback that you can kind of trust more consistently, and then you're like, oh, look at that big boom in the second quarterback spot. That was fun.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that because I'm in a super flex league where I actually have 3 good options every week. I have Howell, I have Trevor Lawrence, and I have Purdy. And every week I'm kind of like, oh, they're all in the same range. They're all one of them's not going to go off. Earlier it was Trevor Lawrence, but now it is Trevor Lawrence going off. And one of them's one of them's going to kind of go, it's just okay, good in real life, but maybe it's not great in fantasy. Howell's the opposite, good in fantasy, not so great in real life. But every week I've got that decision. Yeah.
I think he could be. I'm hopeful for Sam Howell. I don't know. I hope they continue to build around him for a little bit. But I realize there are probably Commanders fans that are throwing things at whatever thing they're listening to this or watching this on. Because he can be a little bit of a roller coaster. But I think he is one of those guys that has attacked some of his deficiencies and doesn't make the same mistake over and over and over again. Like he's kind of figured things out, and I think that there's stuff to work with there.
I'd agree with that.
We'll see.
I'd like to see them invest in a lineman in the first round that coming out
or
here.
2 or 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's get him hit a little bit less frequently.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I have a whole lot of other list of things here, but we're already almost in an hour in. Do you want to hit a couple of questions before I let you out of here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go to this here. Let's see. Nino Pena says, in a redraft league, do you trust Kupp or Christian Kirk going forward?
Dude, that one's tough too. Oh gosh, dude, I don't know. That one's tough. The thing about Kirk is that there's been like a negative correlation with Zay Jones being on the field for him. That has been positive, I think, for the team in general, and certainly for Calvin Ridley in ways that I don't totally understand. Like the things that they started doing with Calvin Ridley as soon as Zay Jones was back. And I'm sure that, if you're a coach out there and you understand why this is, maybe there's got to be an explanation as to why this is. But there were, in the weeks leading up to that, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with Ridley. I don't have any shares of Ridley this year. I guess that's been a good thing until the last couple of weeks. But for the most part, I'm like, they're lining him up on the sideline and then having him run routes on the sideline. And they're not moving him around. They're not putting him in motion. They're not, putting it in a stack or a bunch or anything like that to make his life easier. They weren't doing any of that stuff. Then Zay Jones comes back, and now all of a sudden they're doing that kind of stuff. And oh, whoa, look at this. We're having success. Like that's a shock. But why did it take having Zay Jones back in order to start doing any of that stuff? I don't understand how those two are correlated. I don't get that, but there appears to be some correlation.
But it is, yeah.
But it's a negative correlation for Christian Kirk and also for Travis Etienne. So apparently we can't have all the nice things in Jacksonville at one time. It has to be some here and some there. So let's see. I think I'm tempted to say Christian Kirk, and I can't believe that I'm tempted to say that because in the places where I have Cooper Kupp, unless I have some of the rosters that I mentioned, like an AJ Brown and a Keenan Allen and I think you have to continue to play Cooper Kupp because he could give you 30 points. And I can't explain why he's not. So until, unless there was a specific answer that I could point to, it was like, it's not going to happen, you guys, because in the absence of that, the fact that he's scoring 5 points a game on average in the 5 games, the last 5 games, like, I don't know, but there was a big blow up game in there, and there could be again this week.
Yeah,
So you have to keep trotting him out.
Exactly. It's so frustrating, but I think you're right about that. Quincy Davis says, start one, Charbonnet over Mixon or Singletary.
Well, for me, let's see. I'm gonna eliminate Charbonnet.
Okay.
Of the 3 this week, even though the volume is looking like it's going to be there this week. He had an 87% snap share last week, which was the second best for a running back. So it's great that he's getting the backfield to himself, but look what they did with it. Like nothing. Like they didn't have a single player that scored in double digits in fantasy last week. The Seahawks, not one.
So sad.
So that obviously means he didn't with that volume. Let's see, Mixon or Singletary. What do you think? I've narrowed it down.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Singletary, though I'm disturbed at how they completely went away from the run last week. But at least Singletary still got all the snaps, 47-11. Actually, I look at it. No, I've got them back to back in my rankings. I have Mixon at 19 and Singletary at 20. So I'm not much help here.
I think I might go Singletary. I don't like the Bengals offense, which is traditionally just not a great sign for the running back. And in that offense last week, he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so I think we've kind of had a sneak preview and it could change on a week by week basis. I mean, the good news is that there wasn't a single other player who took a snap or had a carry last week other than Browning. Right. So who's the only running back that had any volume. The bad news is it was 8 carries.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. And 2 yards per attempt or something like that. So, so I think Singletary is the answer there because I think that the offense is more likely to put up points and that's a good sign for him. And so let's go Singletary.
I think the only reason I would have some hope is if T. Higgins came back and proved that he was a threat. And then all of a sudden teams had to dedicate one extra coverage guy. And so they maybe less stacked boxes. That's the thing I'm thinking that could be, but I don't know if that's going to happen. We won't know until Thursday before Friday, Saturday, who knows? Because they're playing on Monday night. Gross.
Are you saying Trenton Irwin doesn't draw that defensive attention?
I love Trenton Irwin, and no, he does not. There's a stat going around today about the outside receivers winning one-on-one matchups, and Irwin was one of those bottom 5 guys. Barely had enough reps, but Carolina had 2 of those guys, by the way. They had Terrace Marshall and Chark were down there. Oh, gross.
Yay. Yeah. What do you think about Thielen this week? Oh, that's an interesting one because
should be a fire matchup, but so tough.
In the Bucs, you can throw on the Bucs. You can get the ball downfield. It feels like if there is a week where we're going to see it flip again. I mean, 1.2, one target for 2 yards. Are you kidding me? Like that was awful
against Tennessee, no less.
That's a good point. You're right. That's especially bad. Yeah, I'd forgotten that they had failed to take advantage of that. Anyway. Yeah, but it could. It might.
Yeah. I have one really bad, awful, no good decision in a super flex league. I have Bryce Young versus Jake Browning. You want to talk about just grossness, but it's
not good. What are you going to do? How are you leaning?
I'm leaning Browning because.
Are you really? You're that done with Bryce?
He's got better players to throw to at least.
That's 100% true, especially if T comes back. And you're right. Yeah. You're right. Because you could throw the ball. You could do Aiden O'Connell hasn't, his stats haven't. But you could do like what he did his first couple of weeks once they pivoted off of Josh McDaniels, which I thought was the most predictable thing ever. Like play Josh Jacobs, play Devontae Adams, because what they're going to lean into here from a culture standpoint is like, we're going to get the ball to those guys. We're not going to outsmart ourselves. We're not going to be cute. We're going to go to Devontae Adams. We're going to throw, if it's double coverage, throw it anyway. That's open in the NFL if you're Devontae Adams. Aiden, okay, quick history lesson of the NFL. Just throw it his way. More often than not, he's going to catch the ball. If he doesn't catch the ball, we're not going to bench you. Like I thought that was the most predictable thing ever, that they were going to just go crazy in terms of targeting him. Gosh, in Bryce's case, there's no one to message that to him.
No.
They took Josh McCown even away from him. Like I'm not expecting that interim coach bump for the Panthers that I usually do expect when people fire their coaches.
I agree with you on that. The owners remains the same. That's the problem. There's no Jamar. I'm always open Chase yelling at him. That's for sure.
Exactly. That's why I started on that tangent was that they at least have Jamar Chase. So you say, hey, Jake, right there.
That's
where you're going to throw it every time.
Nicholas says, who should I start? Herbert versus the Pats or CJ Stroud versus Denver? Talk about a good first world problem.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is.
I am going to go CJ Stroud. I'm going to go CJ Stroud because I don't like the options on the receiving end for Justin Herbert that are not named Keenan Allen. And, I think we saw last week what we saw last week at the end of the year, like in the playoffs. Remember when he had single digit outing after single digit outing? And you're like, he's so good. There's no way he's going to do this again. He can, because the offense is such that it might not support him. And CJ Stroud is in a much better offense. And I think that they are, even against a good defense, guaranteed to score touchdowns. And I can't say that about the Chargers, even as much as I love Justin Herbert. And I think he's incredible and is being sadly wasted.
What's sad is they tried to address it. They spent a first round pick on Quentin Johnston, and it just did not work. You see the side by side, Zay Flowers versus Johnston. And you're like, oh no,
we're going to see it for the rest of time.
Just sad, very sad.
That's the new Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson. I fear. The other one that actually should be the side by side is, here's what Sean Payton has done in Denver this year. Sean Payton, who, according to reports, wanted the Chargers job. And they were like, no. Remember all those reports right after week 18 when he played everybody way too deep into a meaningless game, and I forget which player got hurt, but somebody got hurt, and I was irate. Like, okay, like this is egregious. And Sean Payton's sitting there living in Manhattan Beach, loving his life, wanting that job, and all the reports were, oh yeah, the Broncos don't handle coaching this way. They're probably not going to fire him. They're not going to pay for. I was like, what do you mean they don't do that? Like, historically, like, maybe this is the time, now that we all know that your name is used as a verb for failing to succeed in clutch moments. Maybe we redo the way we've always done things. Maybe we actually shake things up and go make a big splash coaching hire. And now you have Sean Payton out there turning the Broncos around and pulling them out of that dumpster fire. And you're right back where you were, which is looking to potentially fire your head coach and Brandon Staley. And now where are you going to turn? Now, what are your options?
At least Staley does a good job of explaining his position at press conference. Nope, can't go there either. You
know what, though? As a reporter, as a former reporter, I can relate to sitting there and asking questions. And then now that I'm kind of farther away from it, I'm like, oh, don't ask the question that way, though. There are certain questions where you're like, what do you think he's going to say? Yeah. If on a week-to-week basis, you're like, are you thinking about giving up your job because you're clearly failing at it and it's not good? There's only so much that a human being should be forced to take in that department before you expect them to lose their mind.
Yeah, so for sure. I see both sides. He did it himself, remember, early in the season this year, too. So it happens. Yep. By the way, it was Mike Williams that got hurt in week 18 against the Broncos. That back.
Well, you knew it was one of them, right?
Yep.
Mike or Keenan.
Yep. And it took away any downfield option they had. And guess what? They still don't have a downfield option. It's even Josh Palmer got hurt. They had some bad luck here. That Williams got hurt again. Johnston is terrible. And Palmer, who was making progress, then got hurt. But still, it's still the Chargery. Do we
get Palmer back this weekend? Please get him back.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be very nice. Lindorphins with our final question here. Okay. She asks, need help choosing 2 running backs and a flex. Warren versus Arizona, Achane versus Washington, Nico Collins versus Denver, or is Charbonnet at Dallas? Who is the odd one out?
Oh, easy. This one's easy.
All right.
For me, it's Charbonnet.
Yeah, me too.
It's the matchup's tough. Dallas is just not going to give it up. And it's not like the Seahawks offense is like, you don't normally give it up, but wait till we come to town. No, not this year.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't look like Walker's going to play, and I still don't think it matters.
Yeah. What Pete Carroll said yesterday, that he'd seen no indication that his oblique had improved at all. I was like, oh, that's not a good sign. You don't even need to have a strong reporting background of reading between the lines to figure out that that's not a good sign for a Thursday game.
I always think with the oblique injuries, how can you tell though? I mean, is he walking differently? I guess you're wincing a little bit more, but yeah, I don't
Doing
know.
like cross chops.
Yeah,
Like
Carroll's always got
karate moves.
Yes, he's always got weird ways of describing injuries, though. Too, I think what he said it was legit. No, there was a word he used for Walker that I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting way of phrasing it there. But he almost gives you nothing. So if he gives you something, you got to take it for what it is.
Yeah,
That's
that's true.
All right, I think we'll leave it on that note. Lindsay, thank you so much. Such a joy just talking football with you for an hour.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No
I'm
problem.
happy that we finally got a chance to like work together, kind of.
Exactly. We'll have to make that a little bit more regular basis. We'll get you on the RotoWire show sometime too.
Love it. Let's do it.
All right, very good. Make sure to listen to her show, Fantasy Dirt, 1 to 3 Eastern time or 10 to noon Best Coast here.
It's
that's
free
Monday
until December 4th, by the way.
is.
SiriusXM free listening period. And the fantasy channel falls into that. So just like pop it up on in your car. The Sirius button will work this week.
Yes, it will. Channel 87, everybody. All right. That's going to wrap up today's show. Big thanks to everybody for jumping in the comments. Really do appreciate that. Thanks to our sponsors, Circa and Splash. And we've got Mario and John tomorrow. Thanks for listening to RotoWire.